Choosing the right shutter speed is the key to achieving the result you want. If it's too slow, it can cause unwelcome blurring. Too fast, and the photo can look much too static. In this lesson, you'll learn how to photograph moving objects using different shutter speeds to give surprisingly different results. Let's look at two contrasting examples. One where the camera pans alongside a fast-moving object, a motorcyclist, and the other, the fast flow of water in a waterfall. Here, the camera is mounted on a tripod, and a long exposure time is used to achieve this effect. In this lesson, the Nikon D200 digital SLR camera is used. But naturally, you can take these photos with any Nikon digital SLR camera. Let's start with the motorcyclist and choose a good position, sufficiently far back from the motorcyclist to be able to follow him. We use a mid-range telephoto zoom lens, the 70 to 200mm VR Nikkor. Setting the camera to S, shutter priority, means you can take photos with different exposure times. It's important while taking the photo to move with the subject and not to stop moving when you've taken the photo. A series of photos are taken with different exposure times, beginning with 1/1000th of a second. The movement is completely frozen. You can count the spokes in the wheels. Now, let's change the exposure time to 1/500th of a second. With the camera set to shutter priority, the aperture is adjusted automatically. You can see that the background is now starting to blur. Exposure times of 1/250th and 1/125th of a second produce pictures which are closer to the desired result. The big advantage of digital photography is that when you take a series of photos, you can evaluate the results immediately. In this situation, an exposure time of 1/60th of a second produces a photo that gives a good idea of the motorcyclist's speed. For the waterfall, the aim is completely different. The idea is to capture the movement by making the water appear to flow. Setting the camera's ISO value to 320 means you can take the first photo with a very fast shutter speed. In digital photography, just as with film, the sensitivity of the chip, the CCD, is expressed as an ISO value. With a digital camera, this value is adjustable. The higher the setting, the more sensitive the chip becomes, and the less light is needed to activate the sensor elements. The disadvantage of setting the ISO too high is that you get more noise in the photo. The camera is mounted on a tripod because exposure times longer than 1/30th of a second will eventually be used, and this should prevent any camera shake. Let's begin with a fast shutter speed of 1/2500th of a second, which produces this effect. The water becomes sharply defined. You can almost count the drops. Then let's try exposure times of 1/1000th and 1/500th of a second. So far, there's not much difference to be seen, so let's use a slower speed. 1/60th of a second starts to produce a better effect. Now we're moving in the right direction. 1/30th of a second gives this photo. Actually, an even slower shutter speed is required, and because no further stopping down is possible, let's lower the ISO setting to 100. If even longer exposure times are required under these lighting conditions, you can use a neutral density filter, in this case a Nikon ND8, and then you can use longer exposures equivalent to 3 stops. Our final result was achieved with a half-second exposure. If you're observant, you'll see that with the creative use of different shutter speeds, many subjects can be photographed with a suggestion of movement. A further lesson on shutter speed and motion will cover photography in the dark. Our advice to the digital photographer: keep experimenting and your photos will gain in expressiveness.